got the hand on the top, but you can't get in it on the top. It's got the hinges on the top because the lock in the hinge, the lock in the opening is at the bottom. Now, why is that?
Well, for the when it's open, it's only the minister can see what's inside.
This is Matt Chorley from Times Radio, joined by Mohammed Suleman from Barrow, Hepburn and Gale. Explain what it is that you make.
Well, we're always below stairs.
Yes.
And the users are above stairs. They're the gentry, they're the toffs. So below stairs, forever and a day, we have been making and supplying various items to government that include the red boxes.
The famous ministerial red box.
The famous ministerial boxes, internationally respected, even though some of our politicians may not be internationally respected, the boxes are internationally respected, and some of the other items that ministers use. So specialist briefing folders, anything with the cipher on it.
And how long have you been making them? How long have ministers had red boxes?
Well, I think they've... the history of boxes goes back to the way in which the country was run. So the country was run effectively by the monarch.
Yeah.
And his council, Privy Council, acted as his advisors. So in order for the monarch to receive, because he couldn't meet them all the time obviously, he was too busy doing, or he or she was too busy doing other things, the important documents were put inside a dispatch box and dispatched to him, hence dispatch box. These would carry the king or queen cipher, so we will talk about that later, and it would ensure that the documents inside were not ever going to be compromised. They had the king's writ on it, or the queen's writ on it, the king or queen cipher on it. So that's how they evolved. They evolved from the use of dispatch boxes by the monarch for the Privy Council to provide advice and recommendations to the monarch. And they then filtered into general government use round about the late 1700s, early 1800s. They sort of dripped in, if you like. Very much a question of, well, you know, if the king or queen's got one, well, you know, I think I need one. So then we sort of moved forwards a bit, and I think it would be true to say, I know you're the politics expert, but the seminal moment in which this country did change radically from being a monarchy loosely governed via parties of various hues. We're looking then at round about late 1820s, and then we move into the Reform Act 1832. And I think that's the benchmark at which government in this country starts to be, hate to borrow this phrase, but I will, starts to be focused for the people and about the people, because the 1832 Act was about giving the vote.
Giving it to a few more people, not far from everyone.
A lot of hairy
they
industrialists from up
expanded
north.
it. Yeah, absolutely, And when do we start to see, I mean, the most obvious red box moment that people will think of is the budget, the Chancellor outside number 11 waving the budget around. When does that start being a sort of symbol, if you like, of the red box?
Again, it's Gladstone's reforming budget. So that then becomes iconic, becomes a symbol. The budget was framed to fix inequality and injustice, and to provide the means whereby the less well off could benefit from the then aristocracy, the landowners, the factory owners. And I think that's why that box is held up by successive chancellors. Symbolically, it's meant to communicate, well, whatever's in here is going to change everyone's life, and it's going to create a better society from this point on.
And standing on the shoulders of giants and the people who went before, up until the point it basically started falling to pieces and they had to quietly retire it.
Well, yes, it was. It's now part of the National Archives.
Yeah.
And a replacement. Part of the deal was that National Archives would take the Gladstone box into its collection, and they would provide a replacement.
But it's not just the Chancellor, it's all ministers, all government ministers have them.
One of the things that people above stairs don't effectively communicate well, certainly not these days, is that the our government runs on paper. So it doesn't run on WhatsApp. That's highly topical. It doesn't run on a text message. It doesn't run on a phone call. It runs on, obviously, meetings in corridors and chit-chat, but effectively it runs on paper. So the importance of a dispatch box, it's also now framed in, it's now part and parcel of the government security policy framework, is that it secures the information that a minister relies on.
It's an inbox, outbox system, isn't it? Everything goes in, the minister's supposed to read everything.
You say supposed to read everything.
And then they depends how much paperwork they've put in there.
Yeah, well, yes, quite. And it depends how it's packed as well.
And why red? Because security-wise, if you're a minister out and about, advertising the fact of the most eye-catching colour that you're carrying around government secrets doesn't seem very smart. So
I think you've answered your own question.
Why is it red?
I think you've answered your own question.
It's to advertise that you're a very important government minister.
Well, they look good.
Yeah.
Why red? Well, again, it's... you could go back to the use by the monarch. To produce red was always hugely expensive.
Yeah.
So, the red dispatch boxes were devised for the monarch. And I think that just carries through. Although, I have to say, because you're going to ask me why, I brought a black one along. I brought it along for several reasons that we can talk about, but but within government, there is a sort of colour coding system, which often gets overlooked. Everyone sees the red boxes. Everyone sees the Prime Minister of the day valiantly struggling towards the door of number 10, carrying 2 red boxes, making it look as if he has, or he or she has, the arms of a weightlifter. If I were to give you 2 packed dispatch boxes, I think you'd struggle.
I remember once posing with a red one that belonged to a government minister and trying to hold it up like the budget, because it was the budget box is actually quite small, but the other one they're really heavy because obviously secure, nice to be secure and can't be bumped. Let's look at this one then. You mentioned that you've bought in a black box, and it's not a minister. So it looks like a briefcase, black leather. It's got the ER Queen's cipher on it. E2R.
Let's get that right. Yes.
Yeah, it's not that old. And then it's got on it Permanent Secretary, Department of National Heritage. So this isn't a ministerial box. This is a civil service box. But they don't get the fancy red leather.
Some do, some don't. Again, within the system of colour coding, the red boxes tend to be departmental boxes.
Yeah.
So permanent secretaries within departments would have a red box, which is a departmental box.
So I've just thought, actually, so this one's got Department of National Heritage written on it. Does that mean every time there's a reshuffle in the new government departments, you get a call and say, look, we need a whole new load of boxes for the new Department for Science and Innovation and the Department for Energy?
In theory, yes. In theory, yes. But I wouldn't want your listeners to think that I have the wealth of Croesus as a result of that.
But have you had Rishi Sunak on the phone in the last few weeks saying you need to get the gold leaf out?
Well, I think they got in touch last year, and they're still making their minds up about what security features they want for the Prime Minister's boxes.
Let's talk about this one then, because it's got the handle on the top, but you can't get in it on the top. It's got the hinges on the top, because the lock in the hinge, the lock in the opening is at the bottom. Now, why is that?
Well, for the when it's open, it's only the minister can see what's inside. So when the box is presented,
Yeah.
so I'm Sir Humphrey,
Okay.
and you're Secretary of State Matt Chorley,
Right.
the Secretary of State for Times Radio.
Yes. Very good. I like the sound of
Which will
that.
make Mr. Murdoch very happy.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah. So I as your perm,
Yes, you're permanent. So you
Yeah.
put it down in front of me.
yeah, like that. You have the key.
Only I have the key.
Only you would have the key, and your perm would have the key.
Yeah.
So you open it, and you're sitting on the 1820, back to
On the train
Chipping
home.
Sodbury.
And nobody else can see in it.
Yes, quite.
Is there not the risk then that I stand up like that to forget to lock it and it flops open?
There's always
I
that risk.
mean, maybe I shouldn't be running the country if I was that stupid.
It has been known to happen, and those people still have been running the country.
And how many do you produce every year? Do you?
If we have a lazy government, we do a minimal amount. And I have to make that point because I don't want anyone mistakenly assuming or believing that it is first of all, it's not a sinecure.
Yeah.
I was an idiot for rescuing this, but I saw a lot further down the road than perhaps most people did at the time. And they are, as I already on record as saying to BBC Radio, are actually the best deal that the public get out of
Because they
government.
last.
They last.
So if I'm Junior Minister for Paperclips, and then Rishi Sunak.
I thought you were Secretary of State.
Well, I'm
for
Secretary of
Times
State for Paperclips, fine. Secretary of State for Times Radio. But the Rishi Sunak comes along and says, actually, I either want to promote you or I've had enough of you, you can
Yeah.
clear off. Do I get to keep my box?
No,
I don't.
no.
So it just gets passed on to the next person.
That's why I think
You provide
at certain,
decent-
No. At certain times we become very unpopular.
Yeah.
Because if you have lots of chopping and changing, as we seem to have been having within the civil service over the last probably 7 or 8 years.
Yeah.
So, as I said, this role that we've ended up fulfilling is not a sinecure. So if you imagine bright, shiny, 20-odd-year-old, full of the joys of spring, full of hope for the world, that the world can be a better place because he or she has become a civil servant. And we get to the point where Secretary of State Matt Chorley says, right, I'm moving, I'm taking my box with me.
Yeah.
Now, the public have paid for that.
Yeah.
Secretary of State Matt Chorley has not paid for it.
No.
So the rule is, if you want it, you pay the department for it.
Oh. But what you're suggesting is that sometimes junior civil servants might not want to tell Matt Chorley on the way out.
Unfortunately, sometimes that is the case. So
They might disappear.
we get the plaintive cry
Yeah.
or a plaintive email requesting clarification, as in Secretary of State Matt Chorley is adamant that he's going to take his red box, and what do we do? And to which we say, well, you say he can't unless he pays for it.
And so if I am Secretary of State Matt Chorley, how much would it cost me to take my red box?
You'd have to come to arrangement with the department.
Oh, okay, fine.
They know how much they've paid
Because they've
for
paid
it.
you for it, so it's therefore theirs
Yeah.
to decide.
Yes.
And what about, we mentioned, you've touched on the Queen, it's got E2R on it.
Mm-hmm.
Are you making a whole new set for all ministers with
Yes, of course.
C3
yes,
on it?
Some of them have started to get them.
Started to roll them out.
Yeah.
And is it just done on the basis of the tatty ones get replaced first, or the more senior
Well,
people?
we like to, again, as I said, I want to dispel all sorts of myths
Yeah.
and rumours, hopefully, in this. I'm sure there'll be lots of people still thinking that all sorts of nefarious things. So, what we have said to departments that have got E2R boxes that we have supplied maybe in the last 5, 6 or 7 years, because they're still, I mean, they're like Rolls Royces, they're still,
Well,
with mileage on,
they're rock
still
solid,
good.
proper solid
Yes.
wood. They're not falling to pieces.
So we said, well, as long as they're not completely shot, to save the public purse, we will recover the lids.
Oh, I see. So you can keep the box. Oh, that makes sense. You can keep the box and just redo the thing.
Yeah.
And does this also mean that you're producing new dispatch boxes for the new king?
Of course, yes, of course. He's got a job to do.
Yeah.
It's not just
And
they're doing.
Is he getting new ones, or are you recovering old ones?
He made the conscious decision that he would have some of the ones that we did recently for the Queen, his mother, that he would have those recovered because they are in good condition. Now, the issue with the King's boxes, formerly, latterly the Queen's boxes, is that we made them in 1953, 54, 55, and as I have said to others, the industrial landscape has changed. So any request to replicate that in a new box had to be very firmly refused, because you just couldn't do it. It would just be far too horrendous to reproduce a 1953 box that was made for the Queen.
Yeah.
So over the years we've refurbished.
What is it about the 1953 box that means you couldn't replicate it now?
Several things. One, the craftsmen that proliferated in 1953. So we go back to 1953. You know, this was a very different area around London Bridge. So 1953, you had a number of very specialist locksmiths who created the locks that are on the Queen's, now the King's boxes. Those skills just don't exist anymore. So it's a bit of a chicken and egg, that question as well, because I'll explain why. So when in about mid-1990s, late 1990s, MI5 decided that the lock that you see on this permanent secretary box, which was manufactured by Chubb, no longer exist in their previous form. It wasn't secure enough.
Right.
So,
what, like a hairpin or something, you could pick it?
You couldn't really pick them.
But
they decided it wasn't secure enough. So then they did lots of, and had a beauty parade, and they replaced that lock with a special Brahma lock that is unpickable.
Are they all just wood, or is that metal? What goes in? Can you tell me what? Are they all some lead lined? How secure are we talking inside these?
Well, it's a trade secret.
Yes.
I mean, I don't want people queuing up to make them, and I don't want people phoning in or writing in and saying my Uncle Jeff can just knock one up in his back shed. Yes. Elements of it are wood, other elements aren't.
Yeah. And what about stripey? Can we talk about stripey?
You can talk about stripey.
That's the Prime Minister's one.
No.
No.
Well, it is and it isn't.
Go on then. Tell me about stripey.
I think you're flattering me. I think you know more than I think. Than you know. But anyway, stripey, as you know, was created by Cabinet Secretary Armstrong, and well, at least he claims to have created it. What he wanted was for the Prime Minister to see, rather than receive information about ministers' goings-on in various boxes.
Yeah.
So they'd probably get one sheet. Well, it was Mrs. Thatcher that get one from MI6. And in the sort of wading through all the paper, there might be buried at the bottom, some little observation that Secretary of State Matt Chorley was drinking himself stupid in the Dog and Duck.
Nobody believe it.
So Armstrong said, well, we thought it best just to have all that stuff contained in one box. So when the Prime Minister's office contacted us, I wasn't around at the time, but people tell me, they said well, there's an existing box, here it is, and what I want you to do is to inlay a stripe on it, and that's how stripey came into existence.
So that's the one with the top secret stuff in there.
That's the one that every Prime Minister just loves to.
It's the gossip box, basically.
Well, yes. I mean, if you're giving an outgoing minister an interview without coffee, it's the one you want sat behind you, don't you? You don't want the red box.
So finally, then, looking into the future, you touched on it a bit, saying that government isn't all WhatsApp. There is quite a lot of WhatsApp that goes on. It's WhatsApp, it's email, text message, and all of that. What future for the red box for paper going in and out of a red box every night?
When Tony Blair became Prime Minister, there was talk of modernising government. There's always talk of modernising government. It just goes on and on, modernising government. I think, I have a different view of what they should modernise, but, there we go. So he put a backbencher, I can't remember his name, you probably will remember it, in charge of a project that involved looking at electronic boxes. So I'm quite happy to say this because I think it shows that it illustrates that if these are respected throughout the world and they're a demonstration of soft power, only we would think about tinkering with it. So the budget was signed off for this particular project. I think £22 million in late 1990s money, quite a lot of money. And it got nowhere because the civil service were against it. Yeah. Not for the reasons in which, the civil servants get pilloried, Sir Humphrey and, this, that and the other. Because they felt they just couldn't manage the ministerial workload by any other means. Besides which, if we go full circle, although technology was shiny, bright and new then and it was going to conquer the world, we've now come full circle to say, yes, we've certainly witnessed great advances in technology, great advances in communication, digital communication, but fundamentally, is any of this really, really secure?
I suppose that's the thing. It's much harder to hack a wooden box that someone's got in their hand or on the train or whatever than an electronic device that anyone could try and gain access to.
It's unhackable. So then we fast forward. So that I think the then Cabinet Secretary, I did call him because at that time there was a bit of a kerfuffle about vellum. Do you recall?
Oh yeah, I remember the conversation about vellum. Yeah.
Right. So
laws being printed on vellum and whether or not this was a sensible thing to be doing in the 21st century.
So exactly. Well, the sole producer of that would have gone out of business.
Yeah.
And that would have again have been lost. So probably if we come full circle and that had happened, suddenly some bright spark would have woken up and said, oh, why don't we print on vellum? Oh, we don't produce vellum. Oh, they do vellum in Italy or China or Singapore. So at that time, as I said, the vellum discussion was ongoing, the vellum debate was ongoing, and there would have been consequences, financial consequences to the company. I did have a brief conversation saying, well, if this nonsense with replacing this electronically, I'm quite happy to raise the argument all over again, but to do with the boxes, because it's going to affect a British workforce, a small skilled British workforce, and in terms of the consequences, none of what's being proposed is actually going to make any sense. Speaking to ministers that I knew at the time, they weren't in favour of it. And he said, well, I can see things on a screen, but I can't read things on a screen for 4 hours, not 3 hours. So, and then we fast forward to the Cameron government, and I think Francis Maude was put in charge of looking at replacements. And I think he did sort of pronounce that, the red box is over, blah, blah, blah. And of course, our skilled workers panic about things like that. And I said, well, we'll just have to wait and see. And
that's what 10, 13 years ago, and nothing's happened. So they're still going.
Yeah. So periodically, we do have people thinking that the best way to modernise government is to get rid of the workload, because effectively a box and a suite of boxes, because departments just don't have one box, they have umpteen boxes. It doesn't speed anything up. What it means is that it'll just reduce the ministerial workload because I don't need to read anything. And
reduces the ministerial input into what's going on. Finally then, if I came to you and said I'd quite like one for the mantelpiece at home, how much would it set me back?
I don't know. You'll have to speak to the civil service, see whether they're prepared to let you have one.
So you don't sell them to people on the street. They only go through government.
Government boxes go through government.
Yeah.
Official government boxes go through government. We do have a private client business which is overseas.
Yeah.
We don't use the cipher, obviously, but as I said, if and in fact I had this conversation with a lady ambassador only a few weeks ago about the constant missed opportunities of using not just what we do, but using what some of the things that other people do for soft power.
Yeah.
And I said to her, is it me? Am I getting older? But this country used to be so good at soft power, and it just doesn't seem to. Doesn't seem to be able to practice it anymore. So, the private client business involves lots of mainly Americans. They're great supporters.
They buy them just as
they buy them as
things.
desktop items.
Yeah,
they have their own monogram on. They have them fitted out.
Yeah.
So nearly every one of them has them fitted out.
Yeah.
They have some historic links to this country.
Yeah.
They've either worked here. One gentleman who is quite important in the world of finance and hedge funding, ordered one for every one of his umpteen properties.
Oh, wow.
In all various colours.
Blimey.
So,
now, talking about colours, the last question, the green ones. MPs can get green ones to go alongside the red ones.
Not yet.
Not yet, but they're coming.
Yeah, they will be coming, yes. I've solicited more help, because everyone I spoke to after we dropped it, and to the president said, well, that was a great idea. And I said, well, the opposition came.
It was dropped because it was at the height of the MP's expenses scandal.
But also,
people suddenly said, what are you spending money on
it was
that?
dropped because of the attitude of people within the Speaker's office, the then Speaker's office. And we just thought the whole thing was not worth fighting over.
Yeah.
We had far more important things to do. And there was a nonsensical argument raised about the use of the portcullis, and that was just, I just thought, well, you know what, as Confucius says, the easiest way out of a problem is sometimes just through the door, so we just dropped it.
But now it's coming back, and MPs will soon be able to get their own green boxes.
It's structured in the way in which it so if Speaker Hoyle is receptive, we haven't approached him yet.
Yeah.
Because I'm going to approach him via some good friends of his. So if he's listening,
he does listen. He's a big fan of the show. Right. So yeah.
So the structure of it will be that by purchasing one, which will be completely transparent. We're transparent the last time about what we wanted to achieve with it. Is that an element of it will be a charitable donation.
Okay.
So, if we look at where we are in with our politics, I'm not saying this is going to be a game changer, but I think it's important that the members of Parliament are given an opportunity to say, well, we're in this privileged position, and if we do this, we're not just supporting British businesses, but we're also making a contribution to charitable cause, all causes.
Yeah, and you get a souvenir without having to nick it from a government department.
I couldn't possibly say. You could, I couldn't. Now, here's your question. You're the politics geek. So, Department of National Heritage, what happened to it?
It became the Department for Culture.
Media
and Sport.
When?
In '97.
And when was this department created?
I'm going to say 92.
Correct.
There we are, you see.
He's good.
older than I look. Mohammed, it's been really good to see you. Thank you for taking us through the history of the red box, the black box and the green box. Mohammed from Barrow, Hepburn and Gale, thanks so much for joining us.
Thank you, Matt.